A man walks out of prison after 15 years with no money, no plan, and no name. Not a fake name, no name at all. The show never tells you what his mother called him. For 4 seasons, he is simply the man who used to be somebody, and the whole story is built on the fact that nobody around him knows who that somebody was. He tracks down the one woman he served 15 years to protect. He follows her to a small town in Amish, Pennsylvania called Banshee, and on his first night there, he watches the town's brand new sheriff, a stranger named Lucas Hood, who nobody has met yet, get gunned down in a bar. So he does the only thing a man with no name can do. He takes the dead man's name. He pins on the dead man's badge. He becomes Sheriff Lucas Hood, an ex-con master thief running a town's police force, hunting the crime lord who wants him dead while hiding from the crime lord who wants him deader. Before this is over, the body count runs into the hundreds. A whole crew gets torn apart one funeral at a time, and exactly one person figures out who he really is, then lets him walk anyway. This is every episode of Banshee. A man walks out of prison with nothing but the shirt on his back and 15 years of a single idea. He steals a car, drives to Manhattan, and leans on an old friend named Job, a cross-dressing hacker and hairstylist, until Job gives up an address. The address belongs to a woman he calls Anna. Ukrainian gunmen chase him through the city, but he steals a motorcycle and rides out to Banshee, Pennsylvania, a nothing town where Anna now lives as Carrie Hopewell, wife of the district attorney. 15 years ago, the two of them stole 10 million in diamonds from a crime lord called Rabbit. He took the fall so she could run. Now he wants his half. She wants him gone. Therefore, he sits down at a local bar owned by an ex-prize fighter named Sugar Bates to think it over. 2 robbers walk in. So does the town's brand new sheriff, Lucas Hood, arriving early to a job nobody has seen his face for yet. The shootout leaves the robbers and the real Lucas Hood dead on the floor. While our man helps Sugar bury the bodies, the dead sheriff's phone rings. And just like that, he decides to become Lucas Hood. The con needs paperwork, so Job hacks the databases to make the new sheriff real. Hood meets the young mayor Dan Kendall and inherits 3 deputies: Brock Lotus, who wanted the job himself, Emmett Yonners, Siobhan Kelly. He also meets the man who actually runs Banshee, Kai Proctor, an ex-Amish businessman who owns the crime and most of the law. When a thug named Cole Moody beats an Amish man who happens to be Proctor's estranged father, Proctor drags Cole to his slaughterhouse and beats him half to death. Welcome to town. Before the badge is even warm, Hood robs a local pawn shop, taking the safe and the championship belt that once belonged to Sugar. Then he is sworn in and thrown a party at Proctor's house. A drunk, furious Cole Moody knocks Hood out, then opens fire and takes aim at Proctor. Hood drops him with 1 shot. He has been sheriff for about a day, and he has already killed a man in front of the whole town. Back in New York, Rabbit's surviving gunman reports in. "Find them both," Rabbit says. Hood dreams about the night it all ended. The diamonds, the sirens, the 15 years he traded for her freedom. Awake, he corners Carrie at an open house and tells her he loves her. She kisses him back, then punches him in the face and tells him that if he means it, he will leave and never come back. The case of the week is a rave. One of Proctor's dealers, Hanson, throws a party in an Amish farmhouse and sells homemade ecstasy to Banshee's teenagers, Diva among them, Carrie's rebellious daughter. But the batch is tainted. When the department moves in, kids start seizing on the floor, and Diva's boyfriend Reed dies in front of her. Hood chases Hanson, who runs straight home to Proctor. Proctor cuts off the man's finger, feeds it to his Rottweiler, and offers Hanson a 60-second head start. The dog does not need 60 seconds. Along the way, Hood recognizes the elder's daughter, Rebecca Bowman, as the girl he slept with his first night in town. Devout by daylight, wild after dark, he carries a grieving Diva home to her father's arms, while Carrie watches from the landing. Carrie slips into Rabbit's New York apartment and holds a gun on him, and the show confirms what it has been circling. Rabbit is her father. She offers the diamonds for her family's safety. He offers a counter. Hand him Hood, and she goes free. She sedates him, kisses his cheek, and tells him goodbye, Daddy. Back in Banshee, Proctor and the ailing Kinaho chief, Benjamin Longshadow, plan a money-making prize fight at the Kinaho Moon Casino over the objections of the chief's son, Alex. The fighter, Sanchez, is the problem of the week. He assaults and beats a cocktail waitress. Proctor begs Hood to wait until after the fight. Hood arrests him instead, in the middle of a savage brawl that ends with the fighter's arms snapped in front of a horrified crowd. Somebody films it and puts it on YouTube. Remember that. There is a family wrinkle in it too. Rebecca, the Amish girl Hood keeps ending up in bed with, turns out to be Proctor's own niece, and Proctor waits outside the bar to scold her for rebelling the way he once did. Meanwhile, Burton corners Sanchez's manager, Dern, and works him over for the satchel of fight money Proctor put up. Afterward, Proctor comes to make a deal. Hood tells him he is not afraid of him. "Maybe you should be," Proctor says. "Old habits." Hood tries to rob a museum in Harrisburg, trips the alarm, and gets trapped inside. Carrie calls mid-heist to beg him to stay away from her family, works out that he is on a job, and against her better judgment, drives out in the family truck to pull him free. She tells him she only did it to stay off Rabbit's radar. Neither of them believes her. Diva identifies a neo-Nazi named Arno Weber as Hansen's associate. To dodge prison, Arno hands over a severed hand from his freezer and a video of Proctor dumping Hansen's body. So Hood and Yonners arrest Proctor at home. On the drive-in, the Moody Boys ram their truck into the car for revenge, and Hood takes them apart one at a time, keeping a brother's ear as a souvenir, then delivers Proctor to jail like nothing happened. Proctor makes bail by nightfall. Job arrives in Banshee for good. Hood, for his part, starts sleeping with Kat Moody, Cole's widow, while Carrie sits in her car outside his place, watching, turning over the necklace he gave her 15 years ago. Mayor Kendall picks the wrong week to threaten Proctor and gets choked half out of his chair for it. And the state's one witness against Proctor, Arno, is blown out of a motel wall and carried off while Brock watches, helpless. Job scopes an armored truck route to the casino. A heist is brewing. But first, a biker gang called the Kindred rides into the annual Banshee Spirit Festival, and one of them corners and attacks Carrie in an alley. Siobhan arrives and is forced to shoot the man dead, so the gang swears revenge, slashing Siobhan's tires and burning her house to the ground. An FBI agent named Dean Xavier turns up, curious why the star witness against Proctor vanished on Brock's watch. Rebecca stabs a biker off his moving bike in front of her scandalized congregation, then finds her way back into Hood's bed. Two people who both know what it means to live two lives. Holed up and refusing to leave until their man is avenged, the gang's Malcolm Gladwell reading leader keeps them in town far too long. Proctor locates the crew for Hood, expecting a favor in return. Hood clears out the whole gang with a pair of police batons and ships them to Cleveland, where warrants are waiting, and Siobhan gets an envelope of their rings for her trouble. The favor comes due quietly. He trades Hansen's severed hand, the one piece of evidence that could ever jail Proctor, for the gang's location. Xavier goes looking for that missing hand. He is not going to find it. An ex-con named Wicks rolls through town and recognizes the sheriff from prison. Cue the flashbacks. 15 years ago, Rabbit paid a monster called the Albino to make Hood's sentence a living hell. Hood bought himself time in solitary, trained, and when the Albino finally cornered him with a razor, Hood turned it on him and broke his neck with a weight plate. Nobody bothered him after that. In the present, Wicks gets himself arrested just to reach Hood, angling to trade on their history. Hood buys him clothes, a bus ticket, and $2,500 with one instruction: don't come back. Wicks takes the money to the casino, loses it, and beats up two patrons. Then he decides he would like to stay in Banshee and build a life like Hood did, and threatens to expose him if he cannot. So Hood and Sugar kill him and sink him in the lake behind the forge. Meanwhile, Proctor blackmails a reverend into selling his land for the casino hotel, using old photos of the man's wife. Carrie's son Max suffers a bad asthma attack and faces major surgery. And Gordon, watching his wife come apart since the new sheriff arrived, starts asking questions she cannot answer. And Carrie calls her father. "I am ready to bring him to you," she says, "by the end of the week." Then Hood plays a voicemail from Jason Hood, the dead sheriff's son. Carrie makes her move. She tells Hood she has found a buyer for the diamonds, then sedates him and cuffs him to a motel bed miles out of town. She is giving him up to Rabbit to keep her family safe, and Rabbit and his men are already driving in from New York. Then a drugstore robbery goes wrong and becomes a hostage crisis at Banshee High, with Diva and the mayor's wife among the captives. Hood, watching the news from the motel bed, sees Diva in danger and claws to get free. Job shows up with a lockpick, having tracked Hood's phone the whole time. Hood walks unarmed into the gymnasium, turns a gunman's own weapon on him, and shoots the second man before he can execute Diva. The crisis makes national news, which tells Rabbit exactly where his daughter has been hiding. But Hood comes home to find Carrie waiting for him, and after 15 years, the two of them finally end up in bed. Rabbit's right hand, Oleg, is already in town, charming a local waitress into telling him everything. Morning after, Carrie tells Hood that last night was goodbye, that Anna is dead. Then she hands him the thing he never saw coming. Diva is his daughter. If he ever loved her, he will leave. If he does not, she will kill him herself. She walks out into Oleg, who forces her into his trunk at gunpoint, until Hood smashes the window and takes him captive instead. Cuffed inside, Oleg admits he is the one who tipped Rabbit off about their betrayal all those years ago. So Carrie, left alone with him, tells him she knows he has always loved her, and the two of them tear into a long, brutal, evenly matched fight. She takes a wooden plank through the side. She drives it into his neck and kills him. Elsewhere, Rebecca is shunned and thrown out of her Amish home and lands on Proctor's doorstep, the one relative who suffered the same thing years ago. Proctor storms back to the family farm to confront them for it, and old Chief Benjamin Longshadow flatlines, leaving Alex to inherit a tribe he is not ready for. Hood comes home to find Carrie unconscious in a pool of blood and carries her out. Carrie lands in intensive care while Gordon corners Hood at the hospital, certain this stranger sits at the center of whatever his wife is hiding. Job and Sugar bury Oleg and ask what the plan is now. Hood's plan is simple: kill Rabbit. But Rabbit moves first. Carrie wakes, races to secure her son, and reaches Max's school just in time to watch Rabbit's men take him. Then she comes home to find Rabbit sitting calmly with Diva, wanting to talk like a family. Gordon draws on him, and Carrie stops him because Max is the leverage. Rabbit leaves with the boy's breathing machine and a promise: "You will receive no mercy from me." Proctor halts casino construction to remind Alex who is really in charge, and settles his feud with Hood over Rebecca with the usual bloody handshake. Then Rabbit strolls into the sheriff's station, tells Hood this is the last time they will ever meet, and walks out. Hood hears guns cocking all around him and drops. Rabbit's gunmen rake the station with fire, and Hood is finished until Proctor and Burton turn up and save the man they have never fully trusted. So Hood trades himself to Rabbit in exchange for Max. Then Carrie, Sugar, Job, and all three deputies storm Rabbit's outpost. The shootout wounds Sugar and Brock. Rabbit brutalizes Hood and lines up the kill right up until Carrie walks in and shoots her own father. When the rest of the law arrives, Rabbit is gone, leaving behind only an old photo of himself and his daughter. He survived, and Gordon, gutted that Carrie chose Hood over her own family, takes the children and leaves. At Proctor's house, a gambler named Jeffrey attacks him, and Burton kills the man, then later delivers his head to Alex and Nola Longshadow in a bloody bag. Nola decides to stick around, and on a lonely construction site, Mayor Dan Kendall sits calling his wife, never seeing Proctor and Rebecca arrive to teach Alex a lesson. They blow the half-built casino sky high, and the mayor goes up with it. Out in the hills, a few hunters stumble across a body. It is the real Lucas Hood, and a young man named Jason Hood watches a YouTube clip of a sheriff wearing his dead father's name, snapping a fighter's arm in a casino ballroom. Rabbit walked into that metalworks to butcher the man sleeping with his daughter, and walked out a ghost. Carrie cut down nearly every soldier he brought with him. Hood took a beating that should have finished him, and when the smoke cleared, the Ukrainian crime lord everyone assumed was dead had simply bled off into the dark and vanished. Banshee thinks the war is over. It is barely getting started. Hood is still healing, still seeing Rabbit's face every time he closes his eyes, and dead certain the old man is alive. Job and Sugar break into the morgue and steal back the corpse of the real Lucas Hood before anyone can ask why a dead sheriff has a living twin wearing his badge. Then the feds arrive. Special Agent Jim Racine runs a closed hearing. Everyone lies through their teeth about Rabbit, and instead of burying them, he lets them all walk. Racine doesn't want justice. He wants bait. He confesses his cancer has cancer, and he intends to put Rabbit in the ground before it puts him there. So he keeps every player in place and cuts Agent Xavier loose. Then he leans on Carrie. Give up your father or face charges. She tells him no. That night, Carrie, Hood, Sugar, and Job hit the Kinaho Casino's armored truck on the highway. A lone biker with a machine gun runs them down and takes most of the money. The biker is Nola Longshadow. Hours later, she walks into the bar and takes Hood to bed, neither one knowing they crossed paths that afternoon. Diva slips a bracelet into her purse at the mall, gets caught, and threatens to accuse the security guard of groping her until he sets her loose. Gordon buries Mayor Kendall with a eulogy and slides somewhere very dark. And in New York, Racine climbs the steps of an old church to visit the one priest he's sure is hiding Rabbit, Rabbit's own brother, who hints right back that he knows exactly how sick the agent really is. Nola dresses and leaves without a word. Brock comes sniffing around Proctor's strip club about two bodies dug out of the woods, and Kai Proctor plays dumb beautifully. But the feud with Alex Longshadow finally detonates, literally, when Alex blows up one of Proctor's cattle trucks over the casino heist he blames on him. Then Nola beats down a pack of Marines harassing Rebecca outside the bar. Rebecca thanks her. Nola tells her not to thank her yet and takes her. Proctor calls in Hood's favor. Hood carves through Alex's guards to get Rebecca back, and Proctor answers the insult his own way, pouring buckets of animal blood over Alex in his hot tub while Burton cheerfully switches on the jets. Meanwhile, Siobhan Kelly's violent ex-husband rolls back into town wanting his restraining order lifted, and when he attacks her anyway, she caves his head in with a Bible. Carrie draws 30 days and 72 hours to say her goodbyes, none of which go well, so Hood drives her to prison himself, where she picks a fight with an inmate and wins it ugly. Hood ends the night staring at that bloody Bible with something close to a grin. Hood visits Carrie inside, where she thanks him for coming, seeing as she never once came to see him across his 15-year stretch. Meanwhile, Rebecca's Amish brother Solomon and a Kinaho girl named Lana Cleary plan to run away together. Then Lana turns up dead, Solomon goes missing, and the reservation and the Amish are suddenly one spark from open war. The department's eyes land on Tommy Littlestone, Lana's ex, whose older brother Chayton Littlestone runs the Redbones, a gang obsessed with keeping the tribe pure. The badge means nothing on Kinaho land, so Hood walks in anyway, gets thrown around by the much larger Chayton, and only cuffs him because outstanding warrants let them haul him off reservation. Tommy is a minor, so Tommy walks. Then a surprise. Jason Hood, the real sheriff's son, steps out of the crowd, promising silence in exchange for a fresh start, which earns him a warning from Sugar that he will not survive a betrayal. When the Redbones try to intimidate the Amish, Proctor and Burton beat 3 of them bloody, and a hooded figure attacks Rebecca on Amish land. Hood chases him, takes a head wound, and puts a bullet in the man's leg before he limps away into the dark. In the morgue, Nola kisses Lana's forehead and quietly promises somebody is going to pay. At Lana's funeral, Nola tells Hood flat out she doesn't believe Chayton would murder one of his own, then tells her brother Alex to grow a spine. Brock's hunch cracks the case. Solomon's runaway friend Daniel Moses names an Amish teacher, Jonah Lambrecht, a violent zealot who lost his mind over a boy reading Lord of the Flies. Hood visits Lambrecht, spots the fresh wound on his knee, and realizes he's staring at the man he shot in the woods. The fight is brutal, but once Hood has him pinned, he hands the interrogation to Proctor, who pulls the teacher's teeth with blacksmith's tongs until he gives up the boy. They find Solomon bound and broken in a silo. Meanwhile, Chayton headbutts his way out of a transport cage and the Redbones scoop him off the road. Proctor offers Lambrecht's teeth to Alex as a peace token. Alex takes the deal, and Nola, disgusted, buries a hatchet in the teacher's skull before she leaves town for good. And in prison, Carrie gets a visitor she never expected. Her father, Rabbit, wrecked but breathing, sitting across from her very much alive. Carrie gets out, and Hood is the only soul who comes for her. They pick up a tail on the drive home, stop at a small town fair, eat ice cream, case a jewelry shop, and taste for one afternoon the ordinary life that was stolen from them 15 years ago. Hood takes her to the house he bought back then for their escape that never happened, and admits it is finally time to move on. Then, Racine turns up spying from the trees. He comes clean about using them as bait, about botching Rabbit's case as a young agent and getting an informant's family killed, and about knowing full well this sheriff is not the real Lucas Hood. Right as Hood agrees to work together, a sniper puts a round through Racine's skull. In the firefight, Carrie kills the shooter and finds it's the harmless suburban housewife from the fair, one of Rabbit's assassins, while their dream house burns to the ground behind them. Back home, Sugar and Hood share a drink and a hard truth about men like them, that their nature is a cell they can never quite break out of. And Hood answers that idea with 2 words not fit for print. Carrie tucks a pink unicorn from the fair into Diva's empty bed, so they stop pretending. Either Rabbit dies, or they do. If you've stayed with a show this soaked in blood long enough to reach the halfway mark, hitting subscribe is the least self-destructive decision anyone in Banshee has made all season. Hood finally hands Jason his new identity, and that's exactly when a well-dressed Brit named Quentin walks in hunting Jason over $62,000 the kid stole back in Oregon from a man named Brantley. Sugar drops one of Quentin's men with a shotgun, Hood and Quentin trade blows, and the Brit slips away. Alex, meanwhile, begs Proctor to buy him the votes to stay chief, and Proctor agrees, because owning the casino is the one clean legacy he thinks he can leave behind. But Brock is circling, poking through Hood's apartment, finding a photo of the Hopewells and carrying it straight to Gordon. Quentin offers Hood a strange respect, one man of violence to another, then takes his money and grabs Jason anyway. Hood meets him on the road out of town for a fight that ends when a jackknifing semi tears Quentin's head clean off. Jason lives, stops by the bar one last time, and makes the fatal mistake of taking Rebecca to his room, where Proctor and Burton walk in, and Burton strangles him with a garrote as Kai tells his niece she is either with him or she is not. And Job comes home from fencing the diamonds, sets one on the anvil, and smashes it to powder. It's glass. Hood did 15 years for a bag of colored glass. Jason's body goes through the killing floor while Rebecca watches, sick, and Proctor doesn't blink. Hood finds only the dead father's watch and the stolen cash in Jason's motel room, presses Proctor and Rebecca, and gets the same smug nothing he'd handed out himself. So he picks a new war. Sugar reminds him there are a lot of ways to bury a man when you're wearing a badge, and the department raids Proctor's club. Hood finds a drunk Gordon inside. The two of them brawl, and while Hood is beating the acting mayor senseless, Gordon's phone fills with 16 missed calls. Max is in the hospital, a bad asthma attack, and the new treatment is going to cost a fortune, which sends a desperate Carrie back to Job asking for one more job. A dancer named Juliet quietly points Hood toward a white supremacist named Matt Sharp who used to run product for Proctor. There's no clean link between Proctor and his drug operation, so Hood takes the crude route. He, Sugar, and Job break in that night and blow the whole factory sky high. Carrie and Job's robbery trips an alarm. Hood answers the call and covers for them even as he demands to know why he was cut out. Proctor knows exactly who torched his lab and killed the power to his slaughterhouse, and gets the same evasive shrug in return. But Hood wants a charge that sticks, so he breaks into Proctor's basement and finds an illegal arsenal and the casino's books. Rebecca catches him leaving and says nothing. Hood lies to the assistant district attorney about an informant, gets a warrant, and finally puts the cuffs on Kai Proctor, then lines up Alex Longshadow to back the case. It costs people. Emmett's pregnant wife Meg is beaten in the street by Sharp's crew and loses the baby. That night, Emmett empties the holding cells one at a time, offers the men a chance to walk past him, and beats them into the hospital, Sharp barely clinging to life. Job traces Rabbit to a church in New York, and Siobhan, sharp enough to smell Hood's warrant lie, tells him she's done being kept in the dark. Emmett, sick over what he's become, hands in his badge. Job reaches the church first and nearly gets Rabbit in his sights before the priest, Rabbit's brother Ulish, draws down on him. Job fights his way out through a basement full of thugs, staggers into the street, and gets clipped by a passing taxi. Burton executes Sharp for talking and goes after Juliet too, but Rebecca has already warned her to run, and the trust between niece and enforcer keeps rotting. With the witness gone, Hood needs Alex more than ever, and Alex uses the leverage to pull Rebecca closer. Brock lays out for Gordon everything he's dug up on the sheriff, yet Gordon still takes Carrie back. Then Job calls, hurt and cornered, and Hood hands his badge to a shaky Brock and goes. When Gordon answers the door and finally snaps, pulling a gun on Hood, Carrie stops it with the truth. Hood is Diva's father. She walks out to go kill her own. In New York, she and Hood cut down Rabbit's assassins dressed as priests, drag a wounded Job out past a curious New York police captain, and take stock. If they're finishing this, they need more guns. 15 years back, Rabbit, Hood, Oleg, and Carrie plan the diamond heist that starts everything, and Hood and Carrie plot to steal the goods and run. But Rabbit is already onto them, tips the police himself, and Hood draws the cops off to save Carrie and eats the whole 15-year sentence in silence. In the present, Hood and Carrie load up on hardware from an old friend in Chinatown, an arms dealer named Fat Ow, who owes Hood everything he can carry, and hit the church. They take out the first men quietly, then find Ulish waiting unarmed with a firing squad fanning out behind him. Hopelessly outgunned, they empty their guns and prepare to die, until Job and Fat Ow's men storm in and cut the room apart. Ulish comes out shooting, and Hood drops him. Outside, they find Rabbit alone on a bench with a bottle of vodka, beaten and finished. Carrie says goodbye to her father, hands him a pistol, and he takes the way out she offers. The bill still comes due back home. Emmett and his wife are hunted down and gunned down in a parking lot by Sharp's people. Rebecca lures Alex into bed, pulls a gun, and when he fights her, she buries his own dagger in his neck, then shows Kai the proof, and knots herself tighter to him than ever. Brock hands Hood the badge back, till next time. And Diva walks into the station, looks at the man behind the desk, and says, "Hello, Dad." Far off in a fighting cage, Chayton Littlestone kills another man with his hands, hears that Alex Longshadow is dead, and turns for home. He is coming back to Banshee. Alex Longshadow is dead. Whatever fragile piece his name held over the Kanaho went into the ground with him, and now his sister Nola comes home to a fresh grave and a promise. Carrie's marriage is rubble. She told Gordon and Diva almost everything except Hood, and there is no walking that back. And in a big house on the edge of town, Kai Proctor wakes up next to his own niece and starts rebuilding the empire Season 2 nearly took from him. That is the ground Banshee stands on when Season 3 begins. Hood, Brock, and Siobhan corner a skinhead named Hondo, one of the neo-Nazis who gunned down Emmett and his wife. Hondo confesses, then waits politely to be arrested. Out of uniform, off the books, they empty their guns into him instead. Brock takes it hard. He answers a prowler call that turns out to be his lonely ex-wife, ends up in her bed, then drives to Emmett's grave to confess it over a drink. Meanwhile, Carrie waitresses by day and cracks safes by night, working out her rage on men who grope her and sleeping with Colonel Douglas Stowe, who runs the military base at Camp Genoa. Proctor introduces Rebecca to the family business, including the man Burton keeps in the basement. And out in the woods, Chayton Littlestone steps out of the dark, beats the Redbones leader to reclaim the tribe, and leads them in an ambush on a Marine convoy bound for Genoa. Hood walks that base afterward and realizes it is crawling with mercenaries moving millions in undocumented cash. He calls Job, and Nola kneels where her brother died and swears revenge. The heist takes shape as Hood and Carrie case the tunnels beneath Camp Genoa. Carrie breaks things off with Stowe, but not before Hood clocks their connection. A reformed neo-Nazi named Kurt Bunker walks into the Cotty begging for a deputy job, and Hood turns him away, the spot already filled by Billy Raven. Proctor's world gets bloodier. Ohio gangsters come to settle a drug territory dispute, and Rebecca, insulted one time too many, opens fire on the man's legs, then executes him herself. Proctor's mother falls ill, dying of cancer, so he brings her into his home, where Brock's ex-wife Emily signs on as her hospice nurse. Chayton sends men to snatch Rebecca, and Burton puts them both down. Hood and Raven go looking for answers on the Kanaho reservation, brawl with Redbones at the Dog Iron Bar, and get pulled apart by Amy King. Then Diva shows up at Hood's door, wanting to know her real father, and he turns her away rather than do more damage. She storms off, and the next knock at that door comes with a gun pointed at his face. Nola comes for Proctor's house herself, burying an axe in Burton's shoulder to open the fight. Burton pulls it out and goes to work, and after a savage brawl, he kills her, and it nearly finishes him too. Sugar and Jubb scope a security company in Sterling, Virginia, the next brick in the heist. Gordon cleans himself up and immediately clashes with Carrie over Diva, and against Chayton's direct orders, his brother Tommy Littlestone leads a second Redbone strike, this time on the Savoy Gentlemen's Club. The deputies scramble without their absent sheriff, and Billy Raven reluctantly guns Tommy down. As for that gun in Hood's face, it belongs to FBI agent Robert Phillips, who arrests him, but both men get abducted by Brantley, the mob kingpin who ran Jason Hood out of town, and Brantley works Hood over for the kid's whereabouts from an office built on a tractor trailer. Hood turns it around, sending Brantley to a grisly end under his own rolling wheels, then doubles back to save Phillips. Grateful, Phillips lets him walk, but he mentions, almost casually, that he left an FBI file on Hood back at the department, a file Siobhan is about to read. Siobhan reads it. Heartbroken and furious, she throws Hood out of her trailer, though she cannot bring herself to shoot him. Believing his cover blown, Hood moves to say goodbye to Banshee. He apologizes to Diva, who forgives him. He visits Carrie, who has quit the diner and is spiraling harder than ever. Gordon, trying to reclaim his own life, withdraws his plea deal against Proctor. Burton and Rebecca run down the men collecting Tommy's body from the morgue and torch them in their van, but Hood cannot leave with Proctor walking free. He storms the Savoy guns blazing, has Kai dead to rights, and Brock steps in at the last second to arrest Proctor for assaulting an officer. Siobhan lays down her terms. She keeps his secret for the department's sake, but once he finishes the case against Proctor, he resigns and leaves town. Hood accepts, and then the whole building shakes, because a war-painted Chayton and his Redbones have laid siege to the Cotty. This is the one. Chayton's army wants Billy Raven and Proctor handed over to die, and when the department refuses, the siege turns to open war. Hood locks the building down. Trapped inside with him are Proctor, his lawyer Sperling, District Attorney Allison Medding, and Kurt Bunker, who Hood finally hires on the spot. The lawyer tries to spring Proctor and catches a Redbone bullet, but Kai grabs the keys, saves Allison from a strangler in the next cell, and ends up fighting shoulder to shoulder with the man who jailed him. Then they let Proctor slip out a back exit to call for state police. In a lull, Siobhan asks Hood if what they had was real. He tells her yes, tells her about the 15 years he spent in prison, and finally whispers his real name in her ear. But the fight is not over. Raven takes an arrow. Siobhan hides him, kills a Redbone with her hands, and turns to find Chayton standing alone in front of her. Hood has the man at gunpoint. He lowers the weapon and begs Chayton to leave her out of it. A Redbone clubs Hood from behind, and as he crumples, Chayton snaps Siobhan's neck. Across town, Proctor reaches his mother's bedside too late. She is already gone, and on the floor of the Cotty, Hood comes to, crawls to Siobhan, and holds her, weeping, with nothing left to do. Grief owns Hood now. He cannot even climb out of his car at Siobhan's funeral, running the film in his head of every way he might have never stayed in Banshee at all. Proctor buries his mother, reconnects with his estranged father, and lets Emily's kindness turn into something more. Carrie and Job keep prepping the Genoa heist, quietly afraid Hood has lost his nerve. Diva drifts toward a charming dropout named Charlie Knowles. Rebecca pushes deeper into her uncle's operations and gets slapped back down for it. And when an FBI SWAT team rolls in to take Chayton at his wilderness camp, Hood refuses to wait for anyone's paperwork. He and Job slip in ahead of the raid, carve up the guards, and corner Chayton in his tent, where Hood opens the man's leg with his own knife. Chayton bolts into the wild. Amy King gives chase, freezes with the trigger under her finger, and nearly repeats Siobhan's fate before Hood puts a round in Chayton's shoulder. The Redbone leaps off a cliff into the river below and vanishes. The furious SWAT commander promises Hood his badge. Hood tells him to get in line. Hood is losing his grip, seeing Siobhan everywhere he looks, and Job is not sure the man can pull off a heist in that state. Carrie and Gordon race to Charlie's house to drag Diva home, beat the whole crew at their own Fight Club game, and the shared adrenaline pulls the two of them back together, if only for a night on the kitchen floor. Chayton, it turns out, survived the river. He holes up in a barn and coerces a lonely woman into nursing him back to health, then repays her by murdering her and a neighbor on his way out. Proctor drifts toward Emily and off his business, and Rebecca fills the gap by cutting a deal with Salvadoran gangster Hector Morales, quietly breaking Kai's arrangement with the Blackbeards out of Philly. Then, the heist finally lands. A winch on Sugar's truck cracks Camp Genoa open. Carrie beats the safe, and the crew fights its way clear while Hood battles through his ghosts. They escape, and a humiliated Colonel Stowe swears he will make them pay. Then Amy brings word that Chayton is alive and headed to Louisiana. Hood leaves Bunker in charge and goes after him. Hood and Brock track Chayton to an underground fight club deep in Louisiana, and Hood throws himself into the ring against him, only for the venue's manager to break it up. Killing cops is bad for business, so he gives them 60 seconds to leave. They chase the trail into New Orleans, and Chayton finds Hood first, bursting into his hotel room with a knife. Another brutal fight sends the Redbone over the balcony, and Hood runs him down with a shotgun until there is nowhere left to go. Cornered on the waterfront, Chayton accepts the end. He taunts Hood one last time about how delicate Siobhan's neck was, and as he chants a final prayer, Hood blows a hole in his belly and then takes off half his head. They roll the body into the Mississippi. Hood says he is done with Banshee, but Brock reminds him Siobhan would want Proctor finished, and that turns him around. Back home, Stowe shuts down Genoa and starts circling Carrie. Sugar quietly pays off an old boxing debt. Job beats the truth out of the con who was scamming him. And as Proctor returns to the Amish fold, armed Blackbeards drag him and Emily away while Rebecca watches, helpless. The Blackbeards work Kai over, their leader Frazier spelling out that this is payback for Rebecca selling to the Salvadorans. Emily is forced to watch. Hood returns to Banshee to a cold shoulder from Job, who has not forgiven being left for dead. Rebecca asks Hood for help and gets refused, so she tells Brock that Emily is a captive too, and Brock talks the sheriff into moving. Job locates Proctor as a final favor, and Hood and Brock pull Emily out, but leave Kai to his fate. Proctor does not need them. He overpowers his own executioners and kills them, all but Frazier, who slips away, then goes to Emily's door and ends things between them. Meanwhile, Stowe's man Leo uncovers the identities of Sugar, Job, and Carrie, and Stowe's crew starts rounding them up. Deputy Raven arrests Diva getting high in the park. Gordon refuses to bail her, and Hood takes her home against the mayor's wishes. Then Hood and Gordon find the proof that Stowe has taken the crew. In flashback, a young Hood sits in solitary for beating his drill sergeant, and a mild-mannered handler works on him until he admits out loud that he killed his own father. In the present, Leo throws Job in with Sugar and Carrie, while Hood walks into Camp Genoa alone to face Stowe and demand proof his people are alive. He means to take the mercenaries by himself, but Gordon arrives with a sniper rifle, and the two men prep for war without a word. Proctor settles his own account first. He confronts Rebecca, then brings her and Burton to Hector, hands the Salvadoran an authentic samurai sword, and leads them all to Philadelphia, where they wipe out Frazier's men, and Kai lets Hector take the blind gang leader's head. Kurt Bunker refuses to rejoin his brother Calvin's Brotherhood, and pays for it that night when Calvin's thugs burn the neo-Nazi tattoos off his skin with a blowtorch. And at Genoa, Hood and Gordon storm the gate on explosives and marksmanship. Stowe grabs Carrie as a human shield, and Hood, still haunted by Siobhan dying the exact same way, cannot fire. Gordon can. He shoots Stowe's hand. Carrie guts the colonel with his own knife, and only then does Gordon realize he was hit. He dies in her arms, telling her he always loved her. Leo seizes the chaos to shoot Job and drag him off into the dark. Hood walks back into the cotty, hands his badge to Brock, and quits. The state police can sort out Genoa without him. He goes home to find Kai Proctor waiting at his front door, and the two men who should have killed each other a dozen times over just stand there, admiring how good the other one is at staying alive. End of Season 3. When we left Banshee, Job had just been dragged into the back of a van by men who worked for the government, and nobody did a thing about it. Lucas Hood turned in a badge that was never really his and walked into the trees. Rebecca Bowman took the empty seat at her uncle's table. Then the show did the one thing almost nothing on television has the nerve to do. It jumped forward 2 years. Brock follows a set of coordinates through the woods to an abandoned hunting cabin. He goes in expecting nothing. He finds himself staring down the barrel of a gun held by Lucas Hood, now a bearded recluse who looks like the mountains grew him. 2 years gone. In that time, Brock became sheriff of Banshee, and he came all the way up here for one reason. Rebecca is dead, murdered. The third girl in town, gutted in some ritual by a killer nobody can catch. The last coordinates on her phone's tracker led straight to Hood's door. Proctor is the mayor now. He stands at a press conference and swears he won't rest until they find the sick, twisted man who did this, which is rich, coming from him. Carrie has lost custody of her kids and spends her nights playing vigilante against the syndicate Proctor runs. And in flashback, we learn how Hood ended up in that cabin. Drunk, wrecking a motel room, a gun in reach, and every reason to use it, until Rebecca found him passed out and set him up on Proctor's land without asking Proctor first. Carrie learns Hood is back, and it drags her into her own flashback. Months ago, the two of them went to a former government man named Dalton, looking for Job. A gun to his head, Dalton told them what they didn't want to hear. Job is dead. So Hood killed him, and the two of them ran while security closed in. Safe at Sugar's bar, Hood told Carrie and Sugar the search was over. Job was gone. Except, as we'll learn, he wasn't. So Hood cuts the hair, shaves the beard, goes looking. He beats a lead named Aaron Bodeker for answers, and Bodeker points him at his nephew LJ, who was sleeping with Rebecca. Then Brock rolls up and tells Hood the thing he already suspected. He's a person of interest in her murder. The flashbacks fill in the rest. Rebecca never fully cut ties with Hood. She kept him close, kept him breathing, and she tried to build something of her own on the side with a family in the drug trade. It went bad. Hood took a bullet saving her from the Bodeker crew and bled all over the back seat of her car. Remember that. That blood comes back to hang him 2 episodes from now. In the present, Proctor sits down with the Colombian cartel. He wants to be their exclusive East Coast supplier. Therefore, he promises their man 3 tons of pills in 14 days. Meanwhile, Hood squeezes LJ, who swears he didn't kill Rebecca, but tells him something that lands. Rebecca was terrified of her uncle. You want to know what happened to her? He says. Go ask Proctor. So Proctor finds LJ first and kills him. Then Hood's blood comes back from the lab as a match for the blood in Rebecca's car. Brock doesn't know it's from the night Hood saved her. He just knows it looks like a confession. And in a room nobody can find, Job lies broken and beaten and very much alive. With help from Fat Ow, Hood and Carrie finally track Job down and pull him out. 2 years of brutal captivity have left him a ghost of the man he was, and the entire fortune they took from Camp Genoa gets handed over as ransom to get him back. So they end the season's longest hunt broke and wrecked, but together. Elsewhere, Rebecca's parents demand her body for burial, and Proctor pushes to rush the autopsy. That autopsy reveals the thing that reframes everything. Rebecca was pregnant. The child was Hood's. Between that and the blood in her car, Hood gets arrested, and right on cue, the killer strikes again. Now we meet the monsters. Declan and Lilith, a Satan-worshipping couple, are the ones behind the bodies piling up in Banshee, Rebecca included. They take another girl and sacrifice her, and this quietly stops being a whodunit and becomes a question of whether anyone can stop them. And in flashback, we finally see the thing the autopsy already told us was coming. Rebecca dresses Hood's wounds from the Bodeker fight. He tells her she could leave Banshee, walk away from her uncle, start a whole new life. She makes a move on him instead. He reciprocates. That is where the child came from, and neither of them ever got to know it. Proctor, livid to learn Hood and Rebecca were lovers, tries to have Hood pulled out of his cell. Brock threatens to put a bullet in him first. The standoff breaks when Veronica Dawson walks in, an FBI agent from the Violent Crimes Unit, who sends Proctor packing and takes over the case. She reads Hood in about a minute and knows he didn't do it, but keeps him locked up to buy herself a head start. Carrie, dragging a shaking Job along for the ride, torches Proctor's facility to the ground by herself. And when another girl turns up killed the same way, Hood walks free. Hood comes home to find his cabin burning. Proctor's message: "Find Rebecca's killer," Proctor tells him, "and bring him to me." A 6-year-old Kanaho boy saw someone drag a body into the woods, and when Hood coaxes a drawing out of him, it's a man with horns. That thread leads him and Dawson to a fetish club full of surgically modified bodies and the back alley doctor who does the cutting. They agree to work the case together. Meanwhile, the Brotherhood politics boil over. Randall Watts, the real boss, is back and selling the gang on going legit for profit. Calvin takes that as a betrayal of everything they stand for. Therefore, he kills Watts with an ice pick and starts taking the body apart with a saw. Kurt, Calvin's brother, is quietly circling the whole thing, sleeping with Calvin's wife, and hunting for a way out that doesn't end with everyone dead. One of the cult's acolytes walks into the sheriff's station, douses herself in gasoline, and burns alive in front of everyone as a message. Hood and Dawson finally pull the name off the doctor's files: Declan Bode. The horned man has a face now. The two of them, run ragged and haunted, fall into bed together, but Hood breaks down mid-embrace, still gutted by Siobhan. Dawson just holds him. Calvin walks into Proctor's office carrying Watt's severed head and announces the drug business belongs to the Brotherhood now, and Carrie's private war finally reaches her doorstep. A hit team led by Deputy Cruz storms her house, but Carrie, Job, and Diva fight them off, with Diva forced to kill a man to live through the night. They win. Cruz slips away. Then Dawson, chasing Bode's old victim alone, walks into a trap and wakes up strung up in his dungeon with the killer standing over her. Burton, Proctor's silent enforcer, murders Cruz in her shower. Then he and Proctor discover Calvin has stolen their entire product. So Burton walks into the Brotherhood's headquarters alone and takes it apart, body by body. Hunting Dawson, Hood, and Brock get jumped and captured by the back alley doctor, who turns out to be one of Bode's Satanists. Chained in a basement, certain they're about to die, Brock goads Hood into finally telling the truth of who he is and why he came to Banshee, though he never gets to say the name. Hood strangles the doctor with his legs. Together, he and Brock cut through the acolytes. Hood beats Bode to a pulp, and Dawson finishes it with a bullet. Proctor arrives, learns Bode killed Rebecca, and thanks them both. Job, meanwhile, tracks down the man who kidnapped him, drains every account he has, and frames him for a lifetime of crimes. The hunted becomes the hunter. The end of Banshee. Calvin brings an army to Proctor's house to finish him, but Senator Mitchum steps out the front door, reveals himself as a secret head of the Brotherhood, strips Calvin of his authority, and sends the men home. Then Dawson pulls at the loose thread. Rebecca's murder doesn't fit the cult's pattern. Her killer is still free. At Proctor's empty house, Hood finds a hidden basement full of bloodstained tools and Rebecca's necklace, and he decides Proctor did it. He leaves without telling Dawson a word, but Proctor is out closing his cartel deal when Carrie and Job ambush the meat, slaughtering his men to wreck the cartel's faith in him. The Colombians turn on everyone. Brock blows the truck apart with a rocket launcher, and in the chaos, Loera tries to kill Proctor. Proctor kills him first. Then Hood T-bones their car into a ravine. He confronts Proctor about Rebecca, and that's when the real answer finally lands. It wasn't Proctor, it was Burton. Burton killed Rebecca for Proctor, believing he was protecting him. Burton nearly chokes the life out of Hood, but Hood, holding on to Diva and every person he's already buried, breaks him and leaves him broken on the ground. Burton tells Proctor he did it for him and apologizes. Proctor snaps his neck and wails over the body. At Brock's cabin, Calvin comes for Kurt, and Kurt, knowing it's the only way his brother's wife and son ever sleep safe again, shoots him dead. Brock forgives him. That, he says, is how you police Banshee. Hood tells Dawson the truth about Burton. She heads for Washington and leaves him a file that proves she figured out his real name a long time ago, with an invitation to look her up. Proctor, empire gone, luck run out, is last seen opening fire on 6 cartel hitmen who've come to collect, alone, going down the only way a man like him was ever going to go. And after one last goodbye with Carrie, Hood shares a final round with Sugar and Job at the Forge. Job hands Sugar a bag full of cash and leaves for New York. Hood and Sugar walk out the door and off to points unknown. 2 men with no names left to give. That is the end of it. 4 seasons, 38 episodes, a body count nobody could honestly total, and the man at the center of all of it still has no name to give. That was always the point. Banshee was never really about the heists or the badge or even Proctor's empire. It was about a found family of criminals and broken cops who protected each other harder than any of them ever protected the law. And Dawson, the one outsider who ever pieced together his real name on her own, hands it back to him in a folder and lets him disappear with it. If you want more shows that ended on their own terms, the crime recaps are on screen right now. And if canceled and completed shows getting a real send-off is your kind of thing, hit subscribe. That is how the next one gets made.